Thank you very much for keeping your dials on Joy 99.7 FM, Love 99.5 in Kumasi, and over a dozen affiliate stations across the country. On the online, you are viewing and listening on myjoyonline.com as well as multi-TV world/streams. The show is available in the UK and elsewhere in Europe on ABN television. This is your Sky channel. Now, this morning, once again, I am very excited to relax the politicians a while and then have gentlemen who you can depend on and expect to get straight answers to your questions on the show. Justice Francis Emil Schultz is a former boss of the SHRAJ, Commissioner of the Commission on Human Rights and Administrative Justice. Privileged to host you on Newsfile this morning. Thank you very much. And you know, the major reason he's here is because we are talking corruption. We're asking whether or not it is a question that this is a regime where we are seeing unprecedented corruption or allegations of corruption, or it is really the case, as government is making us know, that it's really the case that this president is fighting corruption, and that's why we are hearing about them a lot. I'm happy again, exceedingly excited, to introduce to you once again Professor H. Kwesi Prempeh. He's a law professor, and he's with the Seton Hall University in the United States of America. Good morning, Prof, and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Our regular panelist, Abdul Malik Kweku Baku Jr., Editor-in-Chief of the New Crusading Guide newspaper, is here with his usual bags of documents. And Professor H. Prempeh has been surprised at seeing the documents that he's brought. He's brought like 2 bags full. If the cameras can catch it, you will see. And aside that, he's got another pile of files right inside here. Let's see what he's got to rake up. And also joining us is a lawyer, but he's a politician also. Abraham Amalva. He's with the NDC legal team. Good morning and welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Great to have you. It's been a while. We haven't had you on the show.
Yes.
Great to have you. Great to have you. Okay, so your text messages are welcome 1422. If you have direct questions for any of my panelists, let them come. I enjoy a lot more questions than just the commentary. But you are free to let us know what you think. Send your comments 1422. That's the text line 1422. You can also post them on our Facebook wall and we'll share them with the rest of the world. You can also, alternatively, send your messages to newsfile@myjoyonline.com. And I assure you I'll do my best to share as many of your messages as well. Now, just start with the very first issue that we have to look at. I'm sure that you have been aware of a period where we have had corruption scandals, huge ones. Name them, the JIDA, the SADA, is it the SUBA, and the judgment debts that have been revealed, and those that we are now yet to retrieve as upon the verdict of the Supreme Court. And very recently, we are hearing from various sectors of public office that a lot more is going on. Illiterates have been doing national service, registered with the National Service Secretariat. We're talking about some 7.9 million Ghana cedis that the BNI is revealing has gone to individual pockets, allegedly, at the National Service Secretariat, only for the month of July 2014. Kweku Baku says, if we police these places properly, we'll not need an IMF bailout. Now, well, I just want to start. I'd like to start with you, Kweku, on this issue. We're being told that it is not the case that we are in an era of unprecedented corruption allegations of actual corruption being exposed, but it is the commitment of the government to expose these and in the process fight corruption.
Well, the last time I checked, I'm not sure those exposures that we've had in recent times were initiated by government. I'm not too sure about that. But government has had a certain level of reaction, some positive, some negative, if you were to look at the balance sheet. And we would eventually have to assess the effect by the outcome of what those reactions led to.
Right.
But I think that...
And we'll be dealing with that aspect also because it is critical. The
yes.
outcome of the actions or reactions
yes.
to them.
So I'm not supposed to go there at this particular moment. But the point really is that we are in a new era. Let's say we have a more vigorous media environment. We have multiplicity of media houses and outlets, print and electronic. Unlike previous times in our history, we have set an openness, a certain level of transparency, not generated by governments as such, but pushed out there by civil society and the media. So we have a different environment, and out there, more exposure is taking place. So I am not prepared to give government exclusive credit for what we call the exposures. We may maybe cite one or two instances. Here we are told about the National Service Scheme. We are told by government officials that the president asked the BNI to do so. In the absence of any evidence to the contrary, I'm not prepared to contest that. But it, obviously, the Daily Graphic intercepted or got a leakage, a leaked aspect, and put it out there. Once the thing is made public and the public, civil society gets involved, it's difficult for a government not to do something about that particular exercise. So yes, I would look at it in terms of the phenomenon that Ghanaians as Ghanaians have become a bit more vigilant, a bit more critical, and the instruments of communications have also come to the fore. So this is how I see it in terms of the effect we are having. But otherwise, you see, from a historical point of view, we've had corruption pre-independence and post-independence, some high points in our history. And I'm sure the professor and Michot will have some ideas. We had Jabulu Commission, pre-independence. It was critical. A minister of state resigned in the process. You know, if you recall in Nkrumah's Dawn broadcast, April 1961 or so, 3 or 4 top ministers were dismissed. Properties were seized from them and given to the state. Beyond that, we had the Abraham Committee, which probed some irregularities in the GNTC. Then post-CIS, you had all sorts of commissions of inquiries. Unfortunately, because of their military nature, people tend not to put much premium on it. It doesn't mean that there were not some valid findings, but the overall nature was that people saw them as inquisitions and kangaroo type of things. Beyond that, if you recall, look, Dr. Busia, let me just refer to Dr. Busia. This is Monday, 22nd March 1961, Daily Graphic. It says, bribery, our main program, says Busia. The Prime Minister, Dr. K.A. Busia, has said that the most difficult task facing him today is how to eradicate bribery and corruption from the Ghanaian society. The Prime Minister said the country was in a mess, not because it is lacking in human and natural resources, but just because most of the people are not honest. Quote, bribery and corruption have eaten so deep into the very fabric of the society that when you put anyone in a position of trust, he or she uses that position to amass wealth. Beyond Busia, what did we see subsequently? That Champon, Akufu, AFIC, Blood and Tender, which lined up people, we shot them for alleged corruption. Of course, again, in the context of the People's Court, it's difficult to even authenticate some of those allegations and things. Having come to the Fourth Republic, which is the most sustainable period of our dispensation, we've had high points, and it's interesting. That's why I mentioned Mr. Short in the way. If you recall, 1995-96, there was a major probe by the Human Rights Commission for some high-profile public servants and political functionaries, government functionaries. Findings were made. A government white paper was issued, virtually purging those people of the adverse findings that were made. much later, we've had all sorts of allegations, some proofs have taken place. President Kufuor's own alleged renovation of his house using public funds was a subject of inquiry by the same Human Rights Commission. So we've had high points where we've had instances of corruption. Some were dealt with, some were not dealt with effectively. Go take a look at the Auditor General's report. Take a look at public accounts proceedings and reports. From the 60s, and I've been doing the studies, I've brought some here. From 1964, those that I have done, to today, you'll be surprised that sometimes word for word, the findings, it's just that the quantum of cash has changed. The personalities involved have changed. But word for word, those issues, you know, the abuse of office, the non-accountability elements relative to, they are almost the same. And you ask yourself, what is it that we are doing to ourselves as a people? Perhaps it's the kind of institutions we've put in place, the quality of the legislation we've put in place, and bottom line, perhaps the lack of enforcement of those things. Okay. But I believe we have experts here, people who have better.
And finally, the very last leg of the discussion on this topic will be the most effective way forward, even aside of the anti-corruption plan that is supposed to be in the works, and we don't seem to ever get it finished. Now, just a short, to start with, I'd like to have your thoughts on how you receive what is almost becoming a daily or weekly news of daylight rape of the state.
Well, I think corruption has assumed frightening proportions at the moment, and it's quite disturbing. It is eating into the fabric of our society, and we are losing so much national revenue due to corruption. The Auditor General's reports speak volumes about that. And the recent revelations, take for example the NSS, the National Service Scheme, we are told that there are about 22,000 ghost names, you know, were inserted into the scheme. It beats my imagination how people can contrive to commit corruption at such, you know, at such level. So,
and when you read the reports, there's a suggestion that this is a clear, collusive, collaborative enterprise.
Exactly. And so corruption has been with us. It seems to be on the increase. And I think the reason why it's on the increase is because we have developed a culture of impunity. There is no accountability. You know, the term probity and accountability has lost its meaning. It's no longer in our governance vocabulary. And so over the years, people have been able to engage in acts of corruption, and they've not been held accountable, except for a few instances. The general trend has been one of, you know, lack of accountability. And corruption flourishes when there is impunity, you know. If people know that they are not, either they're not going to be caught, or if they are caught, they're not going to be arrested and prosecuted, then they will continue to engage in corruption. That's human nature, you know. So one of the most effective deterrents to corruption is accountability, holding people accountable when they are involved in acts of corruption. There seems also to be, you know, an impression that when people go into public office, the prime motive is not to serve, but to enrich themselves and to see how best they can take advantage of public resources. The majority, there's a perception that too many people go into public office not to serve, not in the national interest, but to exploit the resources of the state. So it's a combination of factors: the lack of accountability, the mindset of, people who go into public office. And then also the fact that there is no discernible sensitization or awareness creation in the generality of the public about the evils of corruption, the cost of corruption, how we are shooting ourselves in the foot by engaging in corruption. I think if we were to begin to demonstrate to the public the resources that we are losing, which can be used to provide social services like hospitals, educational facilities, better infrastructure. If you do some analysis of this, people will begin to appreciate the cost and the evils of corruption. And all of this is...
Kuku suggested, by reference to the Auditor General's report of yesteryears, and going through, also referring us to the various commissions that have been set up in the past, and some work that you have had to, also been at the forefront of, to suggest that this is not new. But you say that corruption has assumed frightening proportions.
It is not new, but I think that maybe because we have a vibrant media, we have better reportage of corruption. But I think that, in my view, it has increased because of the lack of accountability. When people know that they're not going to be held accountable, then they continue to engage in it, So it's the mindset of not only of those in public office, but even those in the public domain. Corruption is accepted as the norm. And this is a significant difference between corruption in developing countries and in developed countries. In developed countries, it's the exception. It's not the norm.
Right.
You would have occasional instances of corruption, and there's accountability. It doesn't matter what position you hold. We hear instances of people belonging to royal family in certain countries, previous prime ministers and so on, being hauled before the courts for acts of corruption. That is not present in our body politic.
Okay, just hold on briefly. What I'm going to do, I'm going to take Abraham Amaliba's very brief views here. Then I will return and focus the discussion on the two gentlemen right by me, because sometime in the show they may have to leave us, and then the rest of us will continue with our show. Now, Abraham, just a short speaks about corruption having assumed frightening proportions. He's not alone in this. Shortly, I will quote you the Chief Justice, what her view is about the situation presently. Justice Short says that probity and accountability has lost its meaning. Why do you think we are at this place?
I'm happy Commissioner Short amended his earlier position by saying that probably we have a vibrant media which is exposing some of these corrupt practices. And I'm happy Koku Baku has indicated that these things happen long before now. So for me, it's rather the vibrant media that we have that is exposing this. But corruption detests...
They make an absolute out of that.
Corruption detests what I would say sunshine. Corruption thrives in darkness. What this government is doing is throwing light on these corrupt activities. You notice that most of these corrupt practices, when they come up, the government doesn't shy away from it, but rather put in place mechanisms and empower the security agencies to delve into these matters. Look, take JIDA for instance, and I heard Koku Bako say that some of these things are not as a result of government's fight against corruption. When you take JIDA, the current prosecutions, and again, I disagree with Commissioner Short, who says that there's no prosecutions. JIDA is one of it. There's prosecutions going on. You are aware, everybody's aware. Yesterday I was in court. The current prosecutions under JIDA were as a result of government's own report, investigative report. And that investigation team was commissioned by the Minister of Youth Affairs at the time. You are aware?
Investigations that were initiated so motu by the government or the ministry without any prompting. Is that what you're saying?
From anybody? No. Yes. In fact, there were.
No, you're wrong on that.
There was an earlier committee report commissioned by the JIDA coordinator himself that was lying there. Then when the minister assumed office, he also put in place a committee that unraveled the rot that we are being told is happening at JIDA. And I'm saying that I appeared before Yoko. There
had been two investigations.
Something.
Which reports
you gave
have
the
been
other
shelved?
Gentlemen,
No, don't worry. It doesn't matter.
Gentlemen
it doesn't matter. Look, forget about giving people enough time.
And I am building my point.
Look. Just take it easy.
I have not said
Abraham,
anything.
take it easy. Take it easy. Okay. It's not about the point at which I intervene. Okay? Don't worry. Just take it easy. Let's move on. I'm suggesting to you now that in respect of JIDA, there had been about 2 processes which had been shelved for quite a long time. It took media pressure and questions to resurrect to prompt the minister to now do the next investigations. And on the completion of those investigations also, it took a lot of media pressure to have the findings put in the public.
Precisely.
Even though after some, selection of the various aspects of it.
Exactly.
You are wrong, and you know why you are wrong? You are wrong because the 2 earlier investigations were contested by the affected parties. You are aware of this. They said they weren't given fair hearing. The rules of natural justice were breached. You know this. So what was the government supposed to do? Was then to put in another committee that will offer them the platform. All those who said they were not invited and findings were against them, which breach the rules of natural justice. So Samson, let's proceed. I'm saying that the JIDA report is one classical example of how government itself has taken the fight to purge the system of corrupt practices. Koko alluded to another point which he sought to also to water down, which has to do with the NSS. This was also initiated.
I didn't water it.
No, you said that
I said in the absence of, yes, I don't have the evidence, so I don't doubt it.
You have nothing to hang on to it, and that what you can do is just to believe it.
Why not? Is that not a fair account? That's fair comment.
No. You see,
I had nothing.
The impression you create to the listening public is that, oh, this may be true, but it is actually true. It is true because it is the president who initiated these investigations around the NSS rot. Indeed, when you look at the mid-year review, I think the budget statement sent to Parliament by the finance minister, it was one of the critical issues for government to plug the leakages. You've seen how I've connected it? So it is a government deliberate effort to fight corruption. We are not saying that we have done it all. It is a collaborative effort between government and the rest of the civil society. But if corruption is reported, what do you see this government do? The government doesn't sit down and say that it will not prosecute its officials because it fears that the government will be brought down. In fact, in some sections of government, there are those who are thinking that it is not proper to hold one of your own and to subject one of your own to such a public ridicule or whatever it is. But the president has indicated that the Commission of Inquiry's report, and on every platform he has mentioned this, that the findings of those committee reports will be implemented. You cannot doubt the president for this because there are officials who are in court now answering for their actions or inactions. So I think that rather than politicizing it, and you said we'll get to that point, one of the things...
The only official in court answering in respect of the JIDA matter is Abuga Pele.
It's just as if to say that it is only one person who died. One person is one too many. One person from where? from government, and he's there. Other investigations are going on. You are aware that you cannot just hold somebody to court, and all these committee findings, they will have to lay culpability before you can resurrect the next stage. And I'm saying that we are not pushing under the carpet any acts of corruption.
That's one specific.
Which
Just
one?
1 minute about the JIDA and your reference to the prosecutions and my referring you to Abuga Pele being the only official that's so far been hauled before the court and is being prosecuted. What do you say to those who say that they discover what appears to be a sham and that in the end this prosecution is bound to collapse without any results? Number one, Abuga Pele was the coordinator of the project. Clement Kofi Homado was the minister, and he was the one who signed the contracts that are presently being impeached. We lost over 240 million Ghana cedis as a result of one of such contracts. He, the minister, who people think should take ultimate responsibility, is now a witness for the state against Abuga Pele. In criminal prosecutions, do you think it will be successful that the man who cannot be held responsible ultimately is the one being prosecuted, and the one who can be held responsible ultimately is the one being a witness for the state?
You see, this is a matter in court, and I'm surprised you are giving this kind of information. This, I will not want to engage in prejudicial comments. The state apparatus, the security agencies are professionals. And if that is what they have thought wise, so as to unravel the mystery, I cannot fault them. I would only wait when the court gives a judgment. Then I can now review and say that, no, this person was the one you should have sent or not. So once the matter is in court now, I will not want to engage in prejudicial comments. But the larger picture is that you have not seen the government not taking action. And we all agree here. In fact, Kokubako has made the point that there's some action taking place. So for me, that is what is important. You cannot say that in a certain regime, there will not be corrupt practices. There's no way. Because the people who are working for government are not angels. And so if it does happen, if corrupt practices are said to have been occasioned, what is the response of the government? And I think that this government has shown leadership by hauling its own people and putting up committees and commissions to investigate its own officials.
Thank you, sir. Now, Prof, I don't know if you can start on this small specific for me and then move on to, I've seen you written quite a whole lot. Again, he's talking about the government's commitment and approach at fighting the corruption. Again, the National Service Secretariat matter is ongoing. We are told of the district and regional coordinators who have been arrested. Some have been granted bail, some have been denied bail, and I know one of the lawyers has gone to the Human Rights Court to ask for bail for those who have not been granted bail. Now, there are those who say, by the operations, peculiar operations of the National Service, when a service personnel is engaged, it's engaged from the top. They are what they call the pin codes that are generated. The pin codes are generated at the top. So the district and the regional directors only receive a list that says these are the number of people who are supposed to come to your district for you to supervise. So their job is simply to supervise and implement what has been handed them. It is this list that is being challenged as containing that huge number of ghost names. Some ask the question, again, the approach in dealing with the district coordinators and the regional coordinators, are we being sincere with the approach? Because they themselves cannot, by the process, add to the number that is given them from the top.
And the question to me is what?
The approach. How effective do you see it from the point of law?
I don't want to see. I would rather not see it from the point of law. I think what you mentioned, what you've described to me, just is one of the ways in which an institution is designed to work. Right. I think fundamentally, corruption emerges out of the way in which we design and structure our institutions to work. I'm not skipping your comment, but let me give you a very short story that I like to tell when the subject is corruption. Prior to going to the States for the first time, my experience of boarding a municipal bus was that when I boarded the bus, I handed my fare to a conductor who stood just before you boarded the vehicle, and he proceeded to cut me a ticket with which I boarded the bus and would go occupy my seat. When I first went to the States and took a municipal bus, given my background from Ghana, I thought this was the same way we would do it. So I got on the bus, not finding a conductor, I proceeded to hand my cash to the driver, who was the only employee of the bus that I could see. Then he looked at me funny and pointed me to a certain machine that was installed just by him and said, read it. So I read it, said, exact change only. When machine is broken, passengers ride for free. Fortunately, I had exact change. I proceeded to put it in the machine and went to occupy my seat. Then upon going home, I reflected on this experience, this contrast with Ghana. And the conclusion I drew was simple. Justice Short mentioned human nature in the course of his remarks. And I thought immediately, why have they done it this way? Why do we do it the way we do it? And why have they done it this way? And of the two ways of doing it, of paying for your bus, which one would give rise to more corruption? It became immediately clear to me that what they had done with the municipal bus in the US was essentially remove one important thing: opportunity for corruption. The motive is there, right? As long as human nature exists, the motive to cheat, the motive for corruption is inherent in any situation where you give power to a person. And that power could be a resource, that power could be, a decision to be made on behalf of the state. Anytime you give somebody power, that's why we say power corrupts. Absolute power tends to corrupt absolutely. So it is inherent in the nature of power, in the nature of the human being. So the motive for corruption is ever present. But before corruption can occur, that motive must find opportunity. And what they had done, the same people, right, what the US had done, which we had not done, was assume that this conductor would be an honest person. He was not going to sell you, he's not going to collude with somebody, the driver, and go and cut his own counterfeit tickets, that he would account for the money honestly. We had assumed a lot of things about this human being. The US just took it for granted. Human beings are human beings. Let us not tempt them. So what they had done was remove the other aspect of corruption. What you need for corruption to occur is motive, somebody who feels drawn to do corruption for one or the other reason, economic insecurity, whatever reason, but somebody who feels pushed. The push for corruption is there. What the US had done was remove the pool for corruption, the opportunity. What you just described to me is a situation in which we in Ghana have, in fact, ample opportunity for corruption. This is the point I keep making, that when you look at the way in which our institutions are designed, there is an aggregation and concentration of power in the hands of one person, usually at the top. That power is exercised with unbounded discretion. I mean, when you look through our laws, enabling acts of many of the ministries, the minister may, in his own discretion, the minister may do this, the president may do that. We trust authorities with too much power to be used with unbounded discretion. And in addition to having a monopoly of power that is to be used with unbounded discretion, it is also used in manners in a way that is not transparent. We talked about sunshine being being the best disinfectant. True. The way in which power is exercised in this country is very opaque, right? It's behind closed doors. We don't expose it very much. There's a lot of secrecy. So when you put all of this together, the way in which we have designed the state, our public administration, is just rife. I mean, it's really just an invitation to corruption. So this little example that you gave speaks to that issue, right? Why do we trust so much power to one person or a small group of people at the top to make decisions without reference to anybody, without reference, without accountability? It's just not the way in which you organize the public sector or the public administration. And then when you add on to the fact, and we've been talking about why do we hear about corruption so much? People are saying, well, it's because there is more light being shown on the activity. That is probably part of the answer. But one of the other reasons we're experiencing so much corruption, people shouldn't forget that, you know, democracy also has its other sides. We have a political system now in which two political parties, roughly equally matched in their national strength, vie vigorously, sometimes nastily with each other for control of the state. That process by which that competition takes place creates its own, right, motive as well as opportunity also for corruption. It is a heavily monetized process. People have to build a war chest, more or less. If they contemplate coming into office, they build a huge war chest with which to finance their campaigns. That war chest is used for all manner of things, for vote buying, for all manner of things, for the purpose of capturing the state. And when they capture the state, what do you expect would happen? They will seek to recoup what for them was an investment, the investment to capture power. One of the reasons we're also seeing so much corruption is that in that competition, both sides are keen on exposing the other side's malfeasance. So we are seeing more corruption because there's also competition for bad news. Right? The other side is keen to expose the rival so that the Ghanaians would see that they are not being loyal or faithful with your resources. So there is a whole number of reasons why we're seeing more of the corruption. But I think that when I listen to Kweku Bakon's characteristically, historically rooted narrative, there's a pattern to the way we've been dealing with corruption. One is reactive. We've been dealing with corruption after the fact, not preventative. There is very little, even those who make the claim that the government is doing something about it, it's always reactive. They are not saying that the government installed something in advance of a scandal occurring so that the scandal would not occur. No, it's always the government reacting to a story. Second is episodic. It is not sustained. We wait for corruption to talk about corruption when a scandal breaks. Throughout our history, from 1950s all the way, it's episodic, it's not sustained. Third, it tends to be individualized. It's offender specific. Something occurs, it's NSS, it's Abu Gapele, it's one of these. So we can always associate names with the act. We don't approach it from a systemic standpoint. And because of the way in which we have done it, except for Buzia's government, the very first government to ever actually set up a commission to look at corruption without waiting for a scandal to break was Buzia in the, I think, Justice Enin Commission. The report was not tendered before the Buzia government was overthrown. I think it was tendered to the Champon government. But that was the first time that, without any prompting from any scandal, right, and I'm not surprised that Buzia did it in light of what the information that Kweku Bako read to us, that he just decided we need to look at the corruption question. And I think that's really, for me, where we should be headed. We need to have a serious reflection and conversation about corruption that is not driven by a scandal, that is not driven by a commission of inquiry looking into the World Cup, NSS, JIDA, or any one of these things. But that is actually a holistic, comprehensive look at corruption and why it persists, despite what we think are efforts to curtail it. You know, for me, that's where I would want.
You're dealing with the general, you know, the subject in general terms, sometimes in some other specific terms in respect of what measures should be taken.
That's correct.
In President Kufuor's regime, he pledged zero tolerance for corruption. Yet, he had in his own office what he called the corruption office, whatever it was.
Office of Accountability.
Office of Accountability. Some say that was very shameful. Then, within the regime that promised zero tolerance for corruption, we had money literally carried in bags, in cars, to the castle in the name of kickbacks.
Well,
so, what did Kuku say?
I'm sure he
It was not meant for your ears.
to say that.
It was not meant for your ears.
Okay. Well, but you are excited at that. Just take it easy.
No, no.
Now,
interesting, isn't it?
now, the question is, some say, and you have indicated a bit of, by the nature of the way we have structured our governance, then it sounds as if there's no way out. We're going to be in this for eternity.
Of course there is. We have to re-engineer the way we run the state. I mean, right from how we have designed our state, right from the Constitution to how we've designed institutions, we have not really done a very good job of engineering or designing the way in which this country is run. Again, when you go, for example, the first time again that I went to get my driver's license in the States, I walk into this place, and what do I see? I see about 16 different glass counters, right? With the service provider, the employee of the service provider behind each one of the counters. It's glass, so it's transparent. And those of us who have come from the public to get driver's license, you go, there is something that dispenses a number, you pick it, you sit, it's flashing there when your number is your turn, it announces your number, you go, it's transparent, everybody sees it. Even in the design of our offices, even in the ways in which we design offices.
You don't try first to know somebody who is there through a relation or a classmate, get their number, call them and tell them, I am on the way, I don't want to sit in the queue.
When you go, they display all the documents you need to have in advance, it's written there, and so nobody is going to call you to the side and say, oh, give me this, let me go. You submit it yourself, you have to be physically present, the camera is there, it takes your picture instantly, it gives you your driver's license.
You have hope that we'll get to this ideal?
No, all I'm saying is that, of course, we can get there. Why do we have to have every public office here you go? It doesn't matter the level of the status of the president. The office is almost shut behind you. That is opacity right away, right? That's the difference. If I go to DMV here, right, DVLA here, and I go to, the difference there is the way in which the office is designed. It's designed with anti-corruption in mind. The other is designed with opportunity for corruption almost in mind, really. So I'm saying that there are things you can do, even in the architecture of public offices, that can help you fight corruption. Right? But when you actually trust public officials with too much power in a system where there's so much economic insecurity, where there's so much, you know, where there's low stigma, people don't get stigmatized here for being corrupt, right? In fact, when the recent Shraj scandal broke, one of the things I kept hearing, which I thought was unfortunate, is this expectation that how can she have been a lawyer and she doesn't have a house? Embedded in that expectation itself is a certain social acceptance that if you are of a certain status, the way in which you confirm that status is in ownership of certain things big. You have to have a house. If you don't have it, that one is a bit suspicious, right? So there's very little social or moral stigma attached to corruption itself. In fact, we have created expectations that if you are not living the lifestyle of your cohorts, then you may have been a failure, right? And therefore, who wants to be pronounced a failure within their social class? So there are a number of factors. This is why I'm saying that the conversation has to be opened up at a much higher level, right? So that we don't come here each time there's a new scandal, because the scandals will occur as long as this is the way in which we have engineered the Ghanaian state and public.
Thank you, Prof. This is Newsfile, your most authoritative news analysis show. Your views and comments are welcome. We'll be sharing some of them with you briefly. 1422 is the text line, and you can also post them on our Facebook wall. The show is brought to you by the candid sponsorship of Bank of Africa. And Bank of Africa, that is where you can experience the unique banking experience without any stress or any hassle at all. And that's the bank with products that are tailor-made to satisfy your corporate and personal banking needs. All you've got to do is to pick up your phone and dial 0244-33-8226. The number 0244-33-8226. And they will attend to you at the speed that you will be shocked. And also, Tannic Ghana, and that's where the standards are set when it comes to the deals in vehicles. I mean, brand new vehicles and the best vehicles when you're talking about the Chryslers, when you're talking about the Jeep, the Cherokee, and when you're talking about the durable Dodge Durango and Dodge Ram. So call Tannic Ghana 0501-338-072, 0501-338-072 for a test drive. Please try it. As I always say, try it and you will be excited about it. Now, just a short, I don't want us to lose sight of the specifics that have come up recently in the discussion. So I've seen you've made some very copious notes, but again, this is the question that the public is asking, and I think it's a legitimate question. At the NSS, we are told that the director, the one who is at the top here in Accra, is the one the BNI alleges paid the biggest bribe. He, we are not told, has been arrested. The directors at the regional and the districts, who we are told do not generate the names, who we are told cannot add to the names, who we are told the names that were given to them, the excess monies that were approved at the headquarters, that got to them, for which there were no personnel to distribute the money to, they sent those monies back. I've got checks showing that they sent the monies back. Those are the people who are being held and tried. That way, you won't get effective justice, will you?
The point you're making is that we don't hold accountable the big fish, okay? If the information we're getting from the BNI is correct, then obviously there's a conspiracy, and there are a lot of people are involved in this conspiracy. And therefore, I agree with you that everybody involved in the conspiracy has to be held accountable. If it starts from the top, right down from the top to the bottom, everybody has to, anybody who is part of the conspiracy has to be held accountable no matter what position that person holds, okay? So that is my answer to that question. But let me go back to the point I made earlier. I think we should avoid politicizing this issue of corruption, okay? It doesn't help to solve the problem. When I say that corruption has assumed frightening proportions, or when the Chief Justice says it has reached a tipping point, we are not saying that, we are not placing the blame at the doorstep of the NDC government, not necessarily. These events may have occurred even if there was another political party in power, because it's systemic, it's endemic. The corruption is endemic. So I think we should move away from politicizing and trying the issue of corruption, and move away from contrasting what this government is doing and what the Kufuor government did. It's to some extent it may be useful, but I think that we should look at the reasons why we find ourselves in this situation and what can be done about it. And Professor Prempeh talked about the way the state is designed and the facilities for corruption and so on, which are present in our system. And that takes us, of course, to what needs to be done to deal with corruption. And if we have the opportunity, I would talk about the NACAP and what the NACAP, which is a blueprint for fighting corruption, demands that we should do to fight corruption. But in terms of, so as I said, let's move away from this, you know, assertion that, oh, the government is throwing light on corruption and government is doing this and that. Well, okay. In that case, let me ask you a few questions.
Yes.
We have had so many auditors' reports on embezzlement, violation of financial regulations, violation of procurement laws, and so on. How many people have been prosecuted as a result of the reports of the Auditor General? These reports come in every year, and there are copious examples of embezzlement, thievery, misappropriation of funds. We have never seen prosecution arising from these auditors' reports. I was listening to a program on TV3 where Mr. Kendapa, who was chairman of the Public Accounts Committee, was saying that, yes, we look at the auditors' reports, but after we've looked at it, that is the end of our job. That is not the way it should be. There should be coordination between, and I have mentioned this before when I was in office, coordination between the Public Accounts Committee, the Auditor General, the SHRAJ, EOCO, and so on, so that the activities of all these bodies are coordinated, and when the Public Accounts Committee finishes its work, there should be some mechanism whereby certain cases are either referred to the Attorney General's office or referred to SHRAJ or referred to EOCO. So it is not sufficient for government to sit there and, you know, put in place Public Accounts Committee, they do their work and then nothing happens. I mean, that is totally unacceptable.
And when you refer to the Chief Justice's statement that corruption has reached a tipping point, and you say that we should depoliticize the matter, the Chief Justice here was speaking to judges and magistrates, is it, who have just, you know, been, as it were, enrolled. And I want to refer to a portion of it. And she says that our country is caught in an unending spiral of decadence. Every day we read and hear of unspeakable corruption and abuse of public purse by individuals and institutions entrusted with public funds. The situation has reached tipping point, and our citizens genuinely wonder if any public official or institution can stand up to scrutiny. So she, in her office, where she's entrusted and mandated to govern, is issuing instructions to her people that you also have to play a role. So I'm saying, like you said, it's not, when it's mentioned that it's government, it's not really about this political office specific, so to say, right?
Yeah, it's not about that. I know it's also about the institutions. I think we should even move away. Government has a role to play, but it's also about how the institutions of state work, you know. For example, how effective is SHRAJ in carrying out its anti-corruption mandate? You see, I have said time and time again that the anti-corruption mandate of SHRAJ should be taken out of SHRAJ and be given to an independent body that is well-resourced and has powers of arrest, prosecution, you know, like we have in other countries. Botswana has been doing very well in this regard. Indonesia, even Sierra Leone of late.
Professor Prempeh is with you on that particular campaign.
Yes.
But why is that difficult to do? Why didn't you ensure it could be done?
I can't ensure it. I can advocate that it should be done. But the state has to. And I must tell you that not everybody agreed with me. I mean, there were people who said, oh, no, if you give SHRAJ more funds, will be able to discharge this critical mandate. But I don't believe that.
You have a desk for that, don't you, at Shraj?
Yeah, that's a unit, an anti-corruption department, you know. But I have always asserted that that unit, so long as it's under the straitjacket of Shraj, it can never expand in the way it is supposed to expand in order to fight corruption effectively, like it's done in other countries, you know. And I said, we must have a separate, independent anti-corruption agency that is well-resourced, equipped with the relevant personnel, and given, you know, attractive conditions of service and salary to be able to fight corruption. We are not doing that. And I think that is one of the problems. The other problem, as Professor Prempeh mentioned, is that the preventive aspect of corruption is not being looked at. And this has been the case with all the governments that have come back. Take, for example, the institutions. There are certain institutions that are prone to corruption. There is nothing that is being done to look at how these institutions work or how they function, their policies, their procedures, so that you can plug the loopholes, you can reduce the opportunities for corruption, you know, and, you know, nobody's taking any interest in doing that. In other countries, you have a task force. Task force will go into an institution like custom. They will look at how the institution works, the procedures, the policies, and how generally, you know, the institution works, and then they will come up with.
The president has been doing that. He's got a task force that's been able to retrieve some amounts of heavy amounts of money that are issues of evasion of taxes by warehouses, particularly.
No, I'm talking about examining really the institution itself. And looking at the way it functions and what makes it prone to corruption, and the loopholes which need to be plugged, the procedures which need to be changed. And then that task force will then submit a report to the government, and then the whole institution will be redesigned, configured, so as to reduce opportunities for corruption. For example, where there is a need for computerization and to reduce the physical contact between individuals, all these things that need to be done. You know, but nobody is looking at, you know, these things. And all of that, of course, is captured in the National Anti-Corruption Plan. And if we had time...
Yeah, we'll deal with the National Anti-Corruption Plan shortly.
Yeah.
So just hold on now, Prof, just a brief of your thoughts on this. He's talking about the need to yank off the anti-corruption, you know, mandates of Shraj and deal with it separately. You've spoken about it. Exactly what are you looking at?
Well, my point is it starts from a simple proposition, right? If you give an organization multiple mandates that are not necessarily all connected, right? So you give Shraj 3 mandates in one. You say, you are Shraj, you do human rights, you do administrative justice for us, and you do anti-corruption. And in an environment of scarce resources, you know, you give Shraj a pot of money to do the work. You haven't said Shraj should divide
about 90% of the funds Shraj is using is coming from the NIDA, is it?
It's also funded by our donors and the like. But if you put Shraj in this situation, I can predict without even any scandal, and I said this before even the Shraj commissioner, Ms. Lamte, came on the air and said, oh, we actually devote about 95% of our time or resources to human rights. I've been saying this, that if you give Shraj that opportunity, right, to pick and choose which one of his 3 mandates it enjoys doing, it is going to choose the one that is going to give it the less friction with those who finance it, the government. It is inherent in the nature of the beast, right? So I said, I've been saying, if you give Shraj 3 mandates, expect it to do corruption the least. And I'm not surprised that that's what is happening.
I see.
It will do more human rights work. Because there is also a great deal of work actually to be done on human rights. And so once Shraj is doing administrative justice and human rights, it's difficult to say Shraj is not doing anything. It's doing 2 of its mandates and leaving 1. If you have a stand-alone anti-corruption agency or commission, then we judge it simply on the basis of its performance on anti-corruption.
Okay.
If it does nothing, we all see that it has totally failed.
All right.
Now, when you say Stride has failed, its defenders will say, oh, but it's doing human rights work, but it's doing something about trococy, or but it's doing something about witches' colony, but it's educating the people about human rights. That, in fact, is also part of its mandate. Right? So, in my view, if you want to really put Shraj on the spot for corruption, I completely agree with Commissioner Short, Justice Short, who has the benefit of an insider's experience. And if he agrees with me, I think then that gives my point a lot of legitimacy. Okay. Hive off the anti-corruption mandate. That is what is done in most places with viable anti-corruption agencies in Indonesia, in Sierra Leone and other places where, but of course that's not all you do. I agree with his other proposals. In fact, studies have shown that where you have anti-corruption commissions that have powers to follow up on their investigation with prosecution, they have more bite than those that must submit their recommendations to the Attorney General, a political Attorney General, who decides whether or not to prosecute, right? So these are some of the ways in which, if we really we are serious about corruption.
And again, talking about a political Attorney General, we've spoken about decoupling the Justice Ministry from the...
It's really not the Justice Ministry issue. It's really what the Kenyans have done most recently with their constitution. It's the prosecutorial function. So in Kenya today, the Attorney General is the government's chief legal advisor, but not the person with powers of prosecution. Okay. There is an independent director of public prosecutions, right? And also they've done one interesting innovation. And meanwhile, they went through the same colonial experience with us. The IGP in Kenya today is also an independent office. So the minister, in the constitution, the minister is not allowed, no politician is allowed to instruct the IGP on what they can do on a particular case. You can only give policy advice.
Just hold on briefly now. Now I'm going to go back to Amalba and Kwekubaku. And it's interesting, the example he gives about the IGP and his independence elsewhere, which is not happening in our country. I know of a very classic situation where it takes a minister to order certain things, and people cannot get bail on misdemeanor because the minister is making the orders. Now, Amaba, the talk about for example, the NSS. I'm just getting information that, thank you very much, I'm getting information that the BNI actually has invited the executive director of the board together with executive director of the National Service Secretariat, together with 2 of his deputies and some heads of department, and they were granted bail on Thursday. So I think the public can now, relax a bit that he had not been invited at all. He's been invited and granted bail. Now, there are those who suggest that in all of this, the president may have initiated wherever, but people want to see him show sufficient enough commitment beyond simply initiating. As we speak, the board, which is taking the decisions, is now in charge and is dispatching people to the various districts and regions to take over and manage the process. Some say they cannot be independent of the situation. Government announced that there was going to be a new person by the end of this week. We've not had another announcement saying that there's actually a new person.
I think that is not the position. The position is this. The executive director, together with 2 deputies, were dismissed or told to step aside. But they've recalled the 2 deputies because from the investigations, they have not been mentioned or they are not culpable. So they are back. As a result of that, the decision to have the board administer the secretariat has been transferred to the 2 deputies. Following that, the Deputy Minister of Education has hinted that a new person is being considered to quickly go and manage their
And that
affairs.
announcement was supposed to be made by close of this week.
No, but you see, some of these things, you are the same people. When they don't do background checks and then they rush somebody, you say that things are done haphazardly. So allow
Don't
them.
promise us that you do it in the week.
No, what I'm saying is that you should know that these are complex issues. You don't just send anybody there. They have to do some background checks. But it will be done. People even fall sick whilst they are in office, then their deputies act. And these are people, these deputies are not just people, they rose through the ranks, so they have control, they know what is happening. I need to also inform you, I can tell you on authority that on the Shraj bosses issue, and I can tell you on authority that the president, upon his return, has forwarded the two petitions to the Chief Justice for the necessary action. And you know, under the Constitution.
When was this?
No, before the close of this week. You know, he was away when these petitions, especially the second one, came. And so
one by Anodon Prede, MP, and another by Richard Nyama of the PNF.
Yeah, so based upon the advice of the AG and per the Constitution, he has no option. He has forwarded the report to the CJ.
So Inus Hussaini, the minister, was wrong when he told us on this platform the government was going to buy the time and wait until the Auditor General's investigations were completed before it will forward it.
Oh, but that was last Saturday.
Yes.
Today is what? Another Saturday, 7 days. You think the presidency will not be working on some of these things?
What I mean is that the Auditor General is he done with the preliminary audit?
No, there's an initial, not even an initial, there's an Auditor General's report in the substantive audit report. That is going. And the petition is based on what was submitted as an Auditor General's report. President has acted on that. If the second one comes and we need to act, true to our character, we will act.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, let me just help you out there, because you see, irrespective of the ongoing special audit by the Auditor General, what the Constitution provides is that if the President receives a petition for the removal of a justice of a superior court, you know, I mean, that also applies to the Commissioner Shraj. Sure. It says that he shall refer the matter, the petition, to the Chief Justice, who shall determine whether there is
a prima
facie case. You see, so the President doesn't have an alternative.
He has no option, yes.
He has to refer the matter. The Chief Justice will decide whether it's a prima facie case, and then she will then decide to set up a committee to investigate the matter. Just a point of clarification there.
So I alluded to that. So based on the advice of the AG, he had no option, but so he has dispatched it to the CJ.
Right.
This is a clear indication that we are not sitting on those petitions.
You're not sitting on the petitions.
He's compelled to.
But the action in respect of the board, you say people also exercise patience. And
which board?
NSS, getting a new person or doing some action. But the question really was, you don't think the board ought to be affected as well in respect of ultimate responsibility again?
No, because there were investigations. I know that the board has supervisory responsibility over them, the executives. But the investigations has not pointed any finger at the board. And so you cannot be acting on emotions, you know. You must be acting on something substantive or something which is legal. So until investigations reveal that some board members or the board is culpable, you cannot just go ahead and do those things. So based on the reports from the BI now, you cannot begin to be questioning the board.
I see.
That's the point.
Okay.
On the issue of the board, may I chime in here with a point? I think, again, in the spirit of looking at this comprehensively, looking at this problem comprehensively, we have this long-standing practice of the president choosing every single member of the board, every director on the board of a public agency, and then also proceeding to choose the chief executive officer of that same entity, right? Best practice, borrowed from corporate governance and other places, is that you appoint a board, and the board chooses the chief executive officer or the executive director. When both the board and the executive director are sourcing their authority from the same president, that already undermines the efficacy of the board in terms of trying to actually discipline the executive director. So when you have a board in place, but that is not responsible for choosing and firing the executive director, but rather the members of the board as well as the executive director are both appointed by the president or a minister, it's already, you have created a mess to begin with.
Okay.
This is a long-standing practice in Ghana.
Right.
And again, if we are going to be looking at this in a forward-looking way, we have to really sit back and look at that practice. Should presidents appoint all the members of a corporate board, if it's in the public sector, and in addition to that, should the president or the minister also be the one appointing the executive director, then what does the board do? Because the foremost function of a board is to actually, in places where boards work, is to select, evaluate the performance, and if necessary, fire the chief executive officer. A board that has no such power is really not a serious board,
Okay.
right? And so one of the problems we created in the way we structured our public administration is this long-standing practice. I source my power from the president. Who are you, the board member, to tell me that I can't do this?
Right.
In fact, because I'm executive director, I have more power than you because I actually run the organization. You just come to meetings and collect an allowance, right? So we've done a lot of things wrong, and I think we should really act as a people who learn from our mistakes and not keep repeating the same things and expecting different results.
Okay.
It's not going to work.
Now, Kweku, some say, why when it comes to the issue of corruption, why are we always looking at the governments? Because these corruption matters have to do with, one or two persons in public office. The individual, we citizens also have a role. The last time we made reference to the need to actively assert our rights in the Whistleblowers Act. Too many people are not doing that. We only wait for the Auditor General to come out with its report, or we wait for the President to set up a commission before we get to hear that we are paying people $20,000 to lead us to a market in Brazil. So we can't sit back and just be pointing fingers at the government.
Well, some level of finger pointing is okay, it's legitimate. Government, before it gets into office as a political party, goes out there, pledges to the people that if it's given the mandate, it will fight corruption. It will help to eradicate, or if you like, minimize the effect of corruption. And we all know the social cost of corruption relative to our national development programs. So there is a fair share of responsibility that governments have relative to this anti-corruption crusade. So I don't have a problem with it. But I agree that you can't deal with corruption just looking at politicians or governments exclusively. I mean, it's really not realistic. It's a broader phenomenon than we sometimes imagine, and history indicates that. So we should widen it. We're talking of institutions. We're talking of putting in place enabling legislation. We're talking of allowing those institutions that are to enforce those legislation to be given the capacity to do so. So governments can come and go, but there'll be a system in place to deal with that corruption specter. That is going beyond the question of just politicizing or looking at government. So in principle, we should always be clear about what we're doing. Now, to come back, and let me illustrate it with this point about the Public Accounts Committee and its reports and what happens to them, which we've just discussed. The Act 654, the Financial Administration Act 2003, called for the establishment of a financial administration tribunal.
Right.
Section 66 says there is established by this act a financial administration tribunal referred to in this act as the tribunal. The tribunal shall comprise A, a justice of the High Court, who shall be the chairperson, B, a chartered accountant, and C, a management accountant or professional valuer. The members shall be nominated by the Chief Justice in consultation with the Judicial Council and shall be appointed by the President. It goes on to talk about the jurisdiction. The tribunal has the jurisdiction to hear and determine matters that fall for determination under this act. B, to enforce recommendations of the Public Accounts Committee on the Auditor General's report as approved by Parliament.
Right.
What is it that has prevented us from putting this particular thing in place? I don't know, but it's taking such a long time. This is 2003.
Right.
We are in 2014. If there was any problem with this particular legislation or this section of it, couldn't we have cured it? And for that matter, operationalize it?
Kandapa frequently complained about it during his time.
So what is it that is missing? I don't know.
I am told that you need the second person, the composition, an accountant. You need somebody who is an accountant and a lawyer at the same time to be able to occupy that position.
And that chief, I've heard all these things
are
before.
some of the
I've
things.
heard it all.
Okay.
But I'm saying that that's what
read it again. Could you read that portion again?
The tribunal shall comprise a justice of the High Court, who shall be the chairperson,
Correct.
a chartered accountant, and a management accountant or a professional valuer.
3 people.
What
Yes.
other lawyer?
Justice of the High Court,
That's it.
chartered accountant, and a management.
No, I'm just talking about some of the bottlenecks. You've heard that.
I've
You've
heard
that
all sorts
complaint.
of things.
That
That's
this
why I
about
made the
what?
point.
So I don't know whether the judge should be the one who should be an accountant and at the same time
You see-
a
Oh,
lawyer.
it's obvious.
But
There's
it's obvious.
no
No,
ambiguity
no,
in this
no
clause. I
ambiguity.
mean, let not
So that has been the one of the
turn this
reasons
into a
why
lawyer's
we've
fight.
given.
There's no ambiguity in this.
And
in
what
this- in this
Amalba
one.
is saying, we have heard the members of this committee
Yes.
speak about
I've
this,
heard
the same
how-
thing,
Yeah.
the issue he's raising.
Yeah.
I've heard those things,
Yes,
including
yeah,
others, but
yeah.
I'm saying, whatever it is, I assume you without admitting that that's a certain mischief. Why is it taking us this number of years not to cure that mischief in order to operationalize?
There is no mischief.
Wait,
I think time
mischief-
has come for the Chief Justice to explain
But
this
Kweku-
because
Yeah.
she's the one who is supposed to establish this court.
Can you imagine the people who will be hauled before this tribunal if this tribunal was set up? And if the Public Accounts Committee were to refer its
Absolutely.
recommendations to this tribunal? I mean, I want you to start thinking.
I see where you're coming from.
You're asking a question, but I want you to start thinking of why it may be that this tribunal has not been set up.
Absolutely.
Because the potential, I mean, the people who would have to be held before this tribunal, I leave it to your imagination.
But then we are in trouble as a nation. If we can't effect this, we can't bring it in law to operationalize it, then we might as well forget about the fight.
How do you convince
against corruption.
Ghanaians that for all this while, we can't find a high court judge, we can't find a chartered accountant, and we can't find a management, is it accountant also? 3 people. And because of that, we don't have it. Or we can't create the facility that tribunal ought to use.
Yes.
Well,
Well,
question
and in
of-
spite
Well,
of this,
we're
in
in
spite
default
of
of the
this,
law.
in
It's
spite
not-
of this, it is also, I'm
There's a
sure
lack of
you are the
political
lawyers
will.
here, in spite of assuming that this is even out.
Mr. Shaw says it's just about lack of political will.
No, but
Well, it's not lack of political will. I mean, look, it says there is established, right? This is actually it's established.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
the
It was
moment
left
this
for
law came
nominations.
into being, this thing was supposed to have been activated, right? This is the kind of stuff. If you were to go to court seeking a mandamus, right? It really just there is no discretion on your part. This is
Straightforward.
established. You pick them.
But they
All you
be
have to do is pick.
operationalized.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's it.
But you see,
And
this
who
is a
should
statutory
operationalize
nomination.
it?
The
Well-
Chief Justice is supposed to nominate.
Well, then there's a default on the part
It says that
of the
members
nominating
shall be
officer.
nominated by the
Absolutely.
Chief Justice
And
in
appointed-
consultation with the Judicial Council.
and appointed by
and
the
shall be
president.
appointed
Well,
by
we
the
should
So
ask them why
because
they
this
have
is a
it.
statutory duty imposed upon the Chief Justice,
Sure.
the Judicial Secretary should be speaking to this because it's far too long.
Well,
Well, they've
Professor
given all
Prempeh
sorts of reasons.
is giving the hint out there. Any Ghanaian can get up and go to the court and seek a mandamus, compelling the Chief Justice to do her duty.
Yes, but
When
you
I
see,
read it, there's
even
a
in absence-
non-discretionary
in the-
statutory duty.
Right.
in something, in the absence of this, the establishment of this tribunal, we still have the possibility of even putting people before the courts.
The normal court.
Through
Normal
the
courts,
AG process.
absolutely.
So again, we ask ourselves, how many such cases have we sent there based on the Public Accounts Committee's
Recently, the
report?
government announced that it had instructed the AG
To set up a special desk.
to work on the Auditor General's report
Yes.
and ensure that all those who are found culpable were hauled before the court and prosecuted.
Yes, I had. So the president made that announcement. But what has happened
Nothing.
relative to that issue?
So, but even that is problematic, right?
So-
Because normally matters of prosecutorial discretion should not be based on president's instructions.
No.
Interesting.
Right? You don't have to do that. And so
Okay.
we should create a regime where we don't have to wait for a president to instruct an attorney general to bring prosecution. Then that means this is selective. You can do selective prosecution. We ought to really be looking at regimes that work and those that don't.
Okay.
Clearly, this political attorney general with monopoly of prosecution is not working.
Right. Now, let's go to the phone lines and speak briefly to Nana Ato Dazi. He's a former chief of staff, and he was an instrumental part in the establishment of the National Service Scheme. He wants to make some quick intervention. Nana, good morning and welcome to Newsfile.
Instrumental part. This was established. Yeah.
Well, that's the information. Hello, good morning.
National
Okay,
Service
sorry,
Scheme
we've lost him.
was
That's the information
by
I'm
Act of
giving.
Parliament 1980.
Achampon's time, was it?
Established in
Yes.
time first.
No,
Okay.
1980.
Right.
In the current form.
Yes, in the current
but the idea has pre-existed.
Okay. Let me read some of your text messages. Simon in Walawali says, corruption under the watch of John Mahama has assumed an alarming proportion. Where are the values upon which the governing NDC was founded? Joe Dari in Tamale says, even though I agree with Kweku that the media landscape in Ghana has become sophisticated, thus leading to huge expose of corrupt practices in the country, I also think that the current government has demonstrated its commitment to deal with it and must be given some credit for their efforts. Kofiata in Cambridge, UK, says the problem of corruption is the direct result of indiscipline, lawlessness, impunity, and the inability of unwillingness of the authorities to enforce the laws, rules, and regulations, as well as citizens' unwillingness to comply with the law, rules, and regulations. If the laws are enforced and people are made to comply with them, corruption in the country will reduce significantly.
So
Musa,
we are all guilty.
Musa Abata says something. When it comes to the fight against corruption, this particular government had proven beyond reasonable doubt its readiness to fight the canker.
We should amend it.
A clear example is the Jida case, which currently has a sitting MP in court for alleged corrupt practices. Ransford Owusu Opong says, what's the point of throwing light on it if not prosecuting the perpetrators? How much has gone down the drain through corruption already? Indeed, people have been shot and killed for less. It's high time we started acting. Enough of the talk. Kweku Owusu Mensah in Germany writes, the 1992 Constitution has stamped corruption in Ghana. Now, at least Article 286, Clause 4, emphasizes that a gift as an asset. Okay. In Ghana, whoever alleges corrupt practice is compelled to provide evidence before such case is investigated. How then do you expect the menace to ease or to cease? Here in Germany, picking a wallet on the floor, if caught, can be termed as stealing because the law requires you to send it to the lost and found office. Ghana remains a joke. Sofo Yamusa in Kumbungu writes, in my opinion, for corruption to be tackled holistically, our political leaders must implement sound policies aimed at reducing pressure on the citizenry. For example, if governments are also to provide affordable housing for all workers in Ghana, it will minimize the tendency of people trying to steal money in order to build houses. My observation is that many people, right from the grassroots, are corrupt because it remains their best bet of amassing wealth. Eric Yeboah says, I did my service in the northern region. In my district, I once asked how many of us were doing service. By then, I was told we were 250, but on the list, we were more than 300.
this issue of ghost names has been in existence for some time now, but successive governments have just not seen the need to tackle it, probably because they also benefit from it. Okay, I'll hold it on there and go and speak to Nana Atodazi. And the point that texter is making, I've had some people suggest to me that, look, that place is also another political, you know, it's sort of a cash, it's a cash cow, so to speak. There have been monies that have been generated out of that office to fund political party activity. So let us all shut up because it is not new. Nana Tudazi, good morning and welcome to Newsfile. Thank you very much. What is the specific intervention you say you want to make on the National Service?
Well, yeah, good morning and good morning to my friends and colleagues there. Emil, I can see him looking younger by the day. And Kuku's book was showing. Books were all showing.
All right.
I simply wanted to talk about the broad issue of corruption that we're dealing with.
I see.
And I had just a bit of the intervention that was being made. My problem is that it looks like we are bundling everything under the rubric corruption. So even ordinary clear cases of fraud, criminality, abuse of power, you know, I mean, we are dumping them under corruption. And I think that is what is creating the problem for us. We have institutions of state designated clearly to deal with matters. So instead of putting out commissions of inquiry or referring cases to try to work on it is a state. The police is there. Yoko is there. Let's refer the cases up. If it's a case of, you know, bothering on with the stealing, what's not, let's refer to that. It's as simple as that. But the sector of the road is cluttered by, you know, rubric corruption. The newspaper is talking about corruption. And what in the process, we know what it is. You set up a commission of inquiry. What are the consequences?
Okay. So, Nana, sorry, but who is to blame for this? We are being told, for example, that it takes the president to initiate some of these things, and when he does, then we have a statement that comes out to say that this is to the credit of the president for fighting corruption.
Yeah, but what I'm saying, I think that we have a problem when we start ascribing these things to persons. And we belong to a state. So we must have clear institutions of state dealing with issues arising. I'm saying that...
So your message is going to the government communication, is that it?
Well, yeah, I say that you create more problems bringing all those groups into the center. I mean, the police, they know their role. The Yoko knows his role. You understand? The law enforcement agencies are there. If somebody has planted, for instance, good things in the National Service, what has that got to do with commission of inquiry or whatever it is? If it's a good name, it's a criminality, it must be referred to the appropriate place, the person must be prosecuted. You understand? When you talk about disengaging the corruption segment from the human rights thing, that's where you have the problem. You understand? Why should Shrine be spending so much time looking at corruption? When there are specialized institutions of state who deal with issues of criminality. You understand?
So you are supporting the call for the separation?
No, he's not.
I wouldn't be against it, you know, but I'm saying that the stress should be a lot more on, on those specialized agencies. Instead of putting everything together under the rubric, corruption. You understand? We all talk about corruption, there's corruption, but we must be doing something more. We must be taking more proactive steps. You know, like if it's prosecution, then we must be prosecuting. If it's criminality, we must be dealing with the criminality. That's the point I'm making. You understand?
Okay.
Well, as we sit down, we talk about corruption, it's all beautiful. But just on the National Service thing, I say it's a very sad reflection for some of us, because I happen, you know, just in the past 24, you mentioned the letter that set up the establishment of National Service.
You said 84? Sorry, did you say 84?
1974.
74.
I was the president myself.
Okay.
I signed it personally.
Okay.
The National Service Headquarters to be there.
Okay.
Now, I'm saying that I'm making the intervention because I had a group come out to say that national service should be abolished. And I knew, why do you want to throw the baby along with the bathwater? You know, it's so sad. Because the purpose of the national service, among other things, is to generate the spirit of patriotism, nationalism, whatnot in our people. Just that it's been distorted down the line. Until we must find a way of streamlining for our people to travel inside the country, live with our people, and then understand how they educate them. They will be educated themselves. Our children will come back stronger. It is this kind of spirit that led President Kennedy to send out American youth, the baby boomers, out into Africa and other places. Go and spend one semester. You go out there, you see how horrible it is out there, and then you respect your country. You understand? That is the spirit behind it. And I think it's unfortunate that today people are just clamoring to be doing the national service except or Bank of Ghana or whatnot. That is not the spirit.
People are posted to the villages and other places like you are suggesting is supposed to be the ideal for the service, and they never get there because they have one relative or the other here who will intervene and get them to Accra.
Absolutely. I'm saying that it's been distorted. But it's been distorted. I'm saying it's been distorted. You must go back to those things.
Okay. Thank you.
Part of the patrons are still out there.
Thank you very much. We'll now be looking at the actually the plan that I think Emil Short was instrumental on that in the way forward in respect of how to deal with corruption. We'll deal with that in the last segment of this discussion after this break, and then we'll move on to the other issues. Meanwhile, now a few messages here. Now, a senior colleague lawyer sends this one, says that on the Financial Tribunal, don't forget the potential constitutional conflict on who has the power to decide on who is to prosecute. Is it the AG or the PAC, that's the Public Accounts Committee, who will provide the prosecutors? So it appears that between the Act and the Constitution, there may be a conflict.
There's an important information here.
Right.
Courtesy, and I'm sure it wouldn't mind if I mentioned his name, my friend Egbert Fable.
Right.
He says, for my attention, financial administration tribunals have been set up by the Judicial Service since last year. The judges for the two are Constant Hometu, I'm not sure if I pronounce it right, and Afia Sewa Asaribuchui.
That's correct.
It is just that no cases have been brought before those courts yet.
They are hearing normal cases of...
Does this answer the act that we refer to?
By the expectation of this act, I don't think those are the ones that the act is talking about.
Yeah,
those courts are courts with a sole jurist.
Exactly.
This act is talking about
three-person
three-panel.
So this is not the same?
No, it's not. Okay. Right. Okay. And then, okay, this one says that I support Prof. In the case of the NMC, that's the National Media Commission, they have the power to appoint the heads of the state media organizations. That is what we have to do for public institutions. That's where you were saying that the board and the chief executive must all not be appointed by the president. And he again says that, okay, let me just move on here. This one says Samson Buzier. Okay. Buzier's daughter said on another network, that is Frema Buzier, said on another network that Dr. K.A. Buzier started the National Service Scheme, albeit not in its current form.
That is true.
Yes. All right. So that's just information that's known. Samuel Bryan from Awoshi sends this one, says, ghost names can never be eradicated at the National Service as long as the scheme still practices the brick and mortar manual system in its day-to-day operations. It will surprise you to know that human beings still move files, folders, cards, and other documents
from one table to the other and from one office to the other as if we are still in the Stone Age. And I keep asking, why? Bediako in Faude, and in connection to that, I have information, and also I think the BNFT, the Business and Financial Times, has also published, done a publication that says that the National Service Scheme has rejected payment through the eSwish. And that would have also helped. But they rejected it. It was introduced to them and they rejected it. And there's a suggestion that that was obviously for a good purpose, as in serving their private pockets. Bediako in Fawade says, instead of going to Senchi for an economic forum to find ways of tackling challenges facing the country's economy, we should rather head to the Flagstaff House for a corruption cabinet meeting, and Ghana wouldn't have to go to the IMF for a bailout. Kosono Ampem in Spain says the BNI should arrest the national director and the regional directors, all the district directors, as well as the district coordinators, and prosecute them one after the other for causing financial loss to the nation. Okay, so I gave you that information earlier. I'm sure you might have sent this one before I did, that the national boss himself was invited and is on bail. Papa Mieza in Daboase says the BNI must extend its investigations to the Ghana Education Service, Wasa East District, Daboase. Bribery and corruption is the order of the day. The district, okay, I cannot continue with this allegation until I have sufficient, proof to be able to go ahead with it, because you are mentioning people's names and alleging that they are doing some corrupt activity over the place. Adam in Tamale says the trial of Abuga Pele may be a sham, but let me warn him that if he fails to mention all his collaborators, he may well end up being sacrificed, the way Amatekwe was when he failed to mention all those who collaborated with him in the killing of the High Court judges. Abuga, don't die alone. Okay, I'll stop here, and then let's just see if we can finish up the issue, the discussion on the corruption at this point. Now, just a short, I'm sure you've played a pioneering role in the National Anti-Corruption Action Plan. Where is it now, and what difference is it supposed to bring to the fight against corruption?
Well, I was the chairman of the working group that was inaugurated by Vice President Mahama when he was Vice President in 2009. And the working group composed of representatives from all sections, the government, civil society, even the development partners, parliament, judiciary, everybody was represented. And it took us about 2 years to come up with a national action plan. It's a 10-year plan, 2012 to 2021. And it was handed over to the Vice President Mahama then in 2011, and he passed it on to Parliament. Unfortunately, it took 3 years before Parliament tabled it. And it was tabled before Parliament this year, 2014, and has now been adopted as a national policy document, okay? So what is left is for the implementation. This is a document that takes a holistic and comprehensive approach in combating corruption. It has looked at all the approaches that were taken previously and how they all failed and why they failed. And so if we are able to invest in implementing this plan, it would make a lot of difference. I'm sure we'll be able to reduce corruption significantly, because it is a very comprehensive plan. It's based on 3 foundations. 1, massive public education on the evils and the cost of corruption, which I mentioned earlier, that if people get to know how much we are losing in corruption and how much social services we can get if we can stem the tide of corruption, then people will begin to develop the incentive and motivation to report and to combat corruption. So it has a whole list of things that can be done to create awareness about the evils and cost of corruption. This includes community service, education, in the schools as well, juniors, high and senior high secondary, as well as tertiary education, giving these institutions anti-corruption, leaflets and education, establishing integrity clubs in the schools, mainstreaming corruption into the work of the ministries, departments, and agencies, the metropolitan, municipal, and district assemblies, so that corruption becomes a part of the operational work of all these institutions. So it's the public awareness creation dimension is very huge. And the plan has short-term, medium-term, and long-term activities, and a budget is attached to it. There are collaborating agencies and implementing agencies, and there is evaluation and monitoring provided to oversee the implementation of the plan. Then the second one is the prevention. The prevention is where we look at the institutions of state which have been designed in such a way as to make them prone to corruption, and see how we can restructure those institutions, to make them work more efficiently. Look at the loopholes that exist in a lot of these state institutions, plug those loopholes, change procedures and policies in these institutions so that they are more efficient and we could reduce corruption. And then the third aspect is the effective investigation and prosecution of corrupt conduct. And that involves a whole host of things, strengthening the Attorney General's Department, strengthening SHRAJ, appointing prosecutors for SHRAJ and EOCO, educating those who are involved in education in proper investigation techniques, assets recovery, because at the moment, for example, we are not recovering assets. Monies are embezzled, but there is no attempt to retrieve those monies. People have to be trained to know how to trace, these assets that have been embezzled and recover them, and so there is a whole host of activities.
Does it say anything about the change of the assets declaration regime?
Oh
presently?
yes, it does. It does. The assets declaration regime has to be made more effective. It talks about legislation.
Has to be made effective or more effective, because as it is now.
More effective in terms of
as
ensuring.
It is now. When you say more, you mean it's already effective, but you need to increase the effectiveness.
I agree. It's not effective. I mean, there has to be verification. There has to be some means of monitoring, the declaration. So that all of that is in there. The Freedom of Information Bill, the Whistleblowers Act, education on how this encouraging people to use the Whistleblowers Act.
Okay.
So there is a whole host of activities which can be carried out over this period, and if we invest money in implementing it, I'm sure it will make a significant impact on the incidence of
plans which have phrases like words like strengthening that. People say we are too familiar with these, but often they don't translate into reality, what we really want to see on the ground.
That is why
so
in this
that
case,
even though this may be an admission of the shortfalls in our various laws that we thought were sufficient to fight corruption, this one may also end up being another document that we shelved anyway.
The difference is this, that when you list when the activities are listed, we have agencies that have to monitor their implementation over a period. So you have to indicate whether those activities have been achieved within a certain period, okay? And then there's a budget which has to be attached to each activity, okay? there is an evaluation and monitoring agency. SHRAJ is involved in monitoring the implementation of the plan, and also the National Development Planning Commission. So there are duties and responsibilities given to various institutions in the implementation of the plan. So it's not something that is just going to be put down and left, you know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Prof, what do you see? What's the way forward?
Well, I think Emil has mentioned certainly a number of the points. We have to ask ourselves, when a person contemplates a corrupt act, right, what goes in their minds rationally, right? It's a cost-benefit kind of calculus, right? Risk, reward. The reward is very, very clear to them. I'm going to make this much money from this deal. The reward is clear. What is not so clear to them, and it may be actually also quite clear, is the cost. The cost is very little. One, because on the moral side, there's very little social stigma attached. People know what kind of work you're doing. They know how much money you probably make. They probably don't know, but they know you're not paid that well. And yet they see your lifestyle. No stigma is attached to it. There's also low risk of detection. There is very little that, you know, how do we detect that there's a corrupt act? Most of the information about the corruption is secret to the perpetrator itself and the organization or the third party with whom that corrupt act is perpetrated. And there is even if you are detected, there is also low risk of sanctions. So on the benefit side, it's very clear how much money I'm going to make. On the cost side, 0, 0, 0, almost very, very small numbers. If you present that picture to a person who is contemplating a corrupt act, and they are irrational, they will choose to do the corruption. So one of the things we have to do is raise the cost of corruption, right? Raise, which speaks to Emil's point about the part of education, you know, moral education, all of that, will raise the public stigma that's attached to corruption. We must not accept this as normal. But then we also have to do a lot with detection. How do we detect corruption? Asset declaration regimes become important. Currently, our asset declaration regime is a sham. We don't even know when they have been filed or if at all they are filed. And when they are filed, the claims you make on the form as you enter public office as to what assets you own are not verifiable by the public. We can't tell. So if you contemplate that, well, I have only one house, but I'm planning by the time I leave office to have 4. And so I'm going to list that I have 4 when I entered. There's no way we can verify that, right? So there's the low risk of detection. We have to raise the risk of detection, and then the sanctions. I heard Nana Atudazi speak about, well, there are specialized agencies for dealing with these things. It is true, but let's go down the list of those agencies. IOCO, police, BNI, auditor, attorney general. Who appoints all these? Who fires all these people? The president. So structurally, we have created a situation where we have a presidency that is the monarch of all that he surveys. All of these agencies are under the thumb of the executive, right? There is not a single one of them that acts independently of the politicians. Why do we have to maintain this system? Why can't we have a system where we have the IGP? Of course, a government must have an interest in how policing is done. There must be a policy on policing. But on case to case, in terms of how cases are managed, one case after the other, how cases are investigated, there's no reason why that should be a political decision. And that's what the Kenyans have done. The IGP now is free of political control in terms of case-to-case management. His decision to investigate a particular matter has nothing, he cannot be told by a minister or president what to do. The only person who can instruct him, which must be in writing, is the DPP, the Director of Public Prosecutions, who say, go and investigate this matter. Otherwise, it's only on his own say-so that the police will investigate. So we need a certain measure of independence in terms of the operationalization of the police function. We also need the same measure of independence on the prosecutorial side. How are we going to expect that we are going to get any of these cases investigated in a very highly charged, competitive two-party political environment where all of this, the president would see, if we put these people in jail, I mean, each number counts against us in terms of our integrity ranking with the public. Is the Attorney General going to investigate all these guys and prosecute them? Unlikely, right? So why should we leave it as a monopoly of the AG, whether or not prosecuting actually occur? Why can't the Director of Public Prosecutions do it?
From your list,
this is constitutional reform. We'll have to do that.
I say that the Constitution Review Commission did a thorough and a good job, but from your list, I'm beginning to think that maybe we still have a lot more to even add.
Oh, absolutely. We have a whole lot of work to do. You know my opinion on the work product that has been submitted. I don't dispute that they put a lot of thought into it. It depends on how you define the problem that was to be solved. If you define the problem that was to be solved, if you included corruption and if you included it as part of what we have to, how we design the state so that it minimizes these kinds of risk, then you probably have caught it in a different way. I don't know what problem they defined as the key problem of governance that ought to be solved. Whatever they defined it, they've solved it their own way. It looks like they were looking for something they call developmental constitution. So they say that the National Development Plan should be legally binding. That's where they ended up. I end up somewhere different. Right? So there are all of these issues. He also mentioned the issue of use of technology. One of the people who sent a text. Corruption is essentially a face-to-face thing, right? It happens with physical contact. Why do you think many other places these days you apply for passports and other things online? You think it's just fancy technology? What does it do? It cuts out corruption.
Right.
You know, it cuts out corruption. So using technology, the same way, in fact, when I boarded that bus, that municipal bus in Maryland, that was using technology to remove the opportunity for corruption. We need to begin to think seriously about a lot of these things. Right. You know, so we have to do a lot of restructuring, and I'm in one accord with Emil on a number of the proposals that he laid out.
Right. Mr. Mala, what do you say?
You've not asked me a question, but I know what you may be asking me.
Yeah, now we are talking about what ought to be done, effectively deal with corruption. Do you, for example, subscribe to raising the sanctions? There are some who say elevate the punishment for corruption to murder.
You see, for me, I'm excited that today we can freely speak about corruption without having to look behind to see who is standing. I remember 4 years ago when my good self with other 3 lawyers made the point that there was some amount of corruption in the judiciary. We were taken to the cleaners. Our jobs were put online, were blacklisted. But today, I'm excited that we can freely talk about it. So one cure is to allow people to freely talk about it. That's one cure. Without constricting people and asking people that it's a taboo to mention that there's corruption in this institution or that institution.
The call on you at the time was that you are practitioners of the courts, and if you're speaking to corruption and you are mentioning the courts, you should give examples and allow the process to deal with it.
And in fact, that was what we were looking out for. We said, call us and let us provide the evidence. But we're not given that opportunity.
Okay, go ahead. I mean, we all know that. Not all the judges, we cannot say all the judges.
No, it's not all the judges. Some.
Yes.
There's some amount of corruption in every state institution.
You cannot say all of them are clean.
No, no. So if we freely talk about it and allow people to vent their spleen on some of these things, it will help to cure the mischief. Because, like I indicated, if people are aware that what you are doing will be exposed, that for me is one way by which you can nib it in the bud.
Right.
Secondly, I'm of the view that, and the panel, my members, colleagues here have indicated it, we must make it a high-risk venture. He was talking about the corrupt mind. The corrupt mind will do some balancing and to find out how profitable or how disincentive it will be. And when he looks at it and makes a balance sheet and finds out it is more profitable, he'll go into that act. So if you make it a high-risk venture, that is to say, crack the whip wherever it's supposed to be, then persons who are engaged in that will think twice. The next thing for me is to eliminate the human factor in where service delivery are provided. if there are some ways by which we can automate some of these services, then we should. I see that the banks have done something in that regard. I've also seen that in the courts, hitherto, you went and paid your money to a cashier. Now, there's a bank situate in the court, you go and pay. That, for me, is one way of eliminating it, because the bank and the judicial service will now go and reconcile their accounts. On the part of the law, I think that it's now time for us not to criminalize both the giver and taker of corruption. As it is now, under our laws, you look at the Criminal Offences Act, the taker and the giver are both culpable. And you see, the act of corruption is not done in open place. The two people will enter into a small room and engage in it. Now, when I mention corruption, you say, bring evidence. I wasn't one of those engaged in it, but you say I should bring evidence. The proper person to bring the evidence is the one who gave the bribe. But now you are criminalizing his act. And so we need some tinkering around here. If we can use that person as a prosecution witness, I think that I'm out for that. So that there will be the way, now you will never know the one giving you will be the one in the dock, giving evidence against you. So even it would discourage people who do it in the dark alleys, because the same person who is giving you may turn around to even help to prosecute. So these are my recommendations.
Right. Kwaku?
Yeah. You know, you recall that when these allegations were made about corruption in the judiciary by Amalba and his friends or his colleagues, and one of them was given the opportunity to authenticate, his evidence was somewhere in the graveyard. He was targeting a judge who had died. You remember?
Yes, I do.
Yes, they subjected themselves to a certain level of ridicule, and that's why people didn't take them serious. In any case, before then, even chief justices that have come and gone had pointed to the fact that there was corruption in the judiciary. But if you make an allegation that was a bit specific, people were talking of staying in the house of a judge, and people were bringing bribes and all the rest, you turn the chemistry of the debate. So that was why they had difficulties.
No, you're alarming the two together. The person who sent that evidence was not part of the four who were at a public forum.
They were all given the opportunity.
You understand?
The issue is not...
There were four people
He
on the public
confirmed or
forum.
corroborated
Yes.
He
your
said he
claim.
would provide.
And he was asked to provide.
Yeah, so he's not part of those who were at the public forum.
We are talking here of
We were
lawyers.
at a public forum organized by the NCCE.
Correct.
On
That's
corruption.
right.
You
You're
must
right.
get that fact straight.
You're right about that.
We didn't just call for a speaker or a mic to talk.
I am not unaware of that. And I had not taken that out of the submission I made. It was still the same thing I was discussing. So I wasn't talking of a specific location where the allegation was made. That's immaterial in the point I'm making. I'm talking of people who are trained, professionals, lawyers, who had an issue with corruption in the judiciary and were making certain statements. And when they were asked to defend, they were unable to do so.
And
the one who came to their defense.
We were not asked to produce. We were not asked to produce evidence. And who does that?
He's saying that it's not you who was asked.
Somebody else.
Chris Akume was
I was
asked to
clear.
provide.
Was here.
And on
making those
platform.
allegations.
And not
right.
just,
And
he
they
was
called him
then
to
offered
produce.
an opportunity by
Right.
the judicial authorities.
To do it.
And when he wrote to them, his allegation was against a judge that had died years ago.
Yes, that's Chris Akume.
I was
Yeah,
clear
so
in my
he's
mind
just
what I was
speaking to
saying.
Facts. It's okay, let's move on. Your charge is to tell us what you think should be the way forward.
You know, Mr. Short referred to the consolidated exercise that they are going through. I'm for it in principle.
The National Anti-Corruption
Yes,
Policy.
yes. I've been tracking it for a while, and I think it will help a lot. It takes the stakes a bit higher. But you see, I've been asking myself, in 2006, 1st April, the Attorney General's office put out this document, Index to Anti-Corruption Laws of Ghana, in force as at 1st April 2006. And I've been going through it. almost about 16 pieces of enactments. All of them geared against corruption. To be honest with you, even in the absence of the consolidated one, if we had enforced or lived by the letter and spirit of these laws, I'm sure we'll be far ahead in dealing with this corruption matter. It comes back to the lack of political will and the lack of enforcement of these enabling legislations. I am praying so hard that when that report is adopted and brought to bear on our society, it will not become like this piece that I hold here. That is my feeling.
Okay. Thank you very much. And let's
okay.
move. Okay.
Because I was going to make a point that for us, the media, when the newspaper, the criminal libel regime was repealed, it opened up the space for us to do more of these investigative pieces of journalism. And like my young man Anas, you know, recently some people were jailed. Those who were draining national resources, SEPs and police personnel have been jailed by the courts.
Yeah.
Word goes out to people like Manasseh, Azuri, and the rest for the works they are doing. So we, the media and civil society, perhaps to raise the level of our vigilance and investigative prowess to assist some of these exercises.
And mentioning Anas, he just received another award.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just,
I'm going to
a
ask
day or
him
two
to stop receiving awards, just
They're
like
becoming
Kwame
too many.
Sefakai.
Right.
But actually, you know, there is in the plan a training of journalists
Oh,
Okay.
good point.
for, you know, to do the kind of investigative journalism that Anas is doing.
Fantastic.
The budget set out for that, you know. So,
Oh.
you know, there's so many other activities in the plan. If it is,
That's
there's
great.
also. Let me also make the point about the definition of corruption, which Nana Tudansi spoke about. It is also clearly stated in the plan that the definition of corruption in our Criminal Offences Act is very narrow. And Ghana has ratified the African Convention against Corruption, as well as the United Nations Convention against Corruption. And these two documents have a much broader definition of corruption. Therefore, in principle, we are bound to accept the broad definition of corruption, which includes things like illicit enrichment, you know, abuse of office, and so on. So we should be looking at this broad definition of corruption and not the narrow definition that we
But
find
until
in our criminal.
ratification by our parliament, do you think it will be, or you say in principle?
Yeah, in principle.
So,
I mean,
until,
we've
so we need
ratified.
to ratify
We need to pass legislation
to,
you know, to domesticate
Get
it. But in principle, when we're talking about corruption, we should be looking at a broader picture, you know, having ratified these conventions.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think the point Kweku made about enforcement and political will, I would want us to be able to get to a point where we do not rely on political will to activate the enforcement process.
Sure.
Right? So that we really have to take the politics of enforcement out of the picture. We need to give autonomy to Shraj or whichever agency does corruption cases. We need to give autonomy to law enforcement that is not under the thumb of politicians. We need to give autonomy to prosecute the prosecutorial function. If we keep depending on political will to activate the enforcement machinery to fight corruption, the political will is not going to come.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, those
It's a
institutions.
valid point.
Okay, gentlemen, sorry, but
Okay.
we have to end this part of the discussion here.
Okay.
And very interesting, a colleague journalist is sending me, has sent me 2 ID cards. And in these 2 ID cards, they bear the names of 2 individuals who were supposed to have obtained these fictitious ID cards of the UDS in Tamale and used same to be enrolled as national service persons. But I'm told they are stark illiterates. They were picked by the police, and from his understanding, there was some political intervention and they were released. They are walking free.
Interesting.
Very interesting there. Fredia Ajiman, German South District says, I am happy with the composition of your panel this morning, especially Justice Short, Samson, a late governor in Nigeria, Mr. Mbakwe once said, money is not the problem, but how to spend it. How true to Ghana today? The president is fighting corruption on paper and in an indefensible, selective manner, which would get nowhere in court. The riddle is that no culprit is found and punished. They are as slippery and as eel through executive and administrative loopholes. Perhaps the president is a major... Okay. All right, let's move on. I'm unable to continue with that. Don't accuse people so directly without any information. Stephen Beidu from Wasai Kropon says, I have lived many years in the Netherlands and Germany, but I am back to Ghana now. Comparatively, we Ghanaians live in a totally disorganized society. Indeed, there is the urgent need to re-engineer our society in general, starting with our governance system and state institutions. Now, Fatao Inwa says, why can't government prosecute public officers who are indicted by the Auditor General's report year on and to serve as a deterrent to others? That's all good questions that you're asking there. Now,